I'm Lloyd Holiday, and this is the Cost of a Thing podcast. Thanks for listening in today. So what happened to that great standard of living that we used to enjoy here in America in the 1960s and even into the 1970s? Well, that's what the Cost of a Thing podcast is all about, and that's what I'm going to be talking about here. Okay, today I'm going to talk a little bit about minimum wage and how that relates to standard of living. In all this, and I'm talking about this because I hear that the Democrats and Biden are thinking about trying to increase the minimum wage to, I think, $15 an hour. Now, anytime you can get an increase in pay, that's a good thing, but sometimes there's negative consequences to raising the minimum wage, and it causes employers not to be able to hire as many people, for instance, or it could drive up prices. The one thing I hear that could be the big thing, one of the biggest things that would be negative about raising the minimum wage would be it causes employers to not hire as many people because their business can't afford to pay these people $15 an hour. So they only hire them for very short periods of time, part-time or that kind of thing, and maybe they have to lay off people because they can't afford to keep people on at $15 an hour. But I don't really think the raising the minimum wage is the best way to increase our standard of living. The goal, I think what they're trying to do is increase people's standard of living. In other words, they can buy more stuff and pay their bills and get by in life better. Well, the best way to do that is not by raising the minimum wage, it's by lowering prices. Lowering prices is what really increases the standard of living. And if you're raising the minimum wage to $15, say you're in a city like Seattle or anywhere, Minneapolis, and houses cost $400,000 or $500,000 for an average, 1,400 square foot, 1,500 square foot house, $15 an hour is not going to help at all in that situation. And it might even end up driving rents higher, because when the landlords see that everybody's got an extra $4 or $5 an hour, hey, they might say, hey, this is a great time to raise rents. And they'll just vacuum up all those extra few dollars an hour into those rents. And then the guy that's working for the minimum wage won't really be any better off than he was before he got when he was making $8 or $10 an hour. In my opinion, what the government could do if they wanted to make people's standard of living better is not raise the minimum wage, but lower the prices especially of housing and rents. And the government is the main cause of the high house costs and high rents that we have around the United States right now. And that's what's lowering our standard of living. That's the main thing people pay for is rent. That's their biggest expense, or housing. And that is why our standard of living is lower than it used to be, is because housing is more expensive than it used to be. I talk about this all the time on my podcast, that housing to buy a house used to be about 2 to 3 times the average guy's annual income in any area. Well, now it's, you see in these areas, it can be 10 times the average person's income, even 20 times the average person's income in some of these bubbled areas along the coasts. And then rents used to be, the rule of thumb used to be rent should not be more than 25% of your monthly income, the monthly rent payment. Well, that's gone out the window in places like the coastal areas again, New York and San Francisco, Los Angeles. rents can be $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment or more. And that's not even a nice apartment. That's just a plain, dumpy apartment. It's not very nice. And so to meet the 25% rule there, a person would have to make $12,000 a month to pay for that one-bedroom apartment. Well, I bet most of them aren't making $12,000 a month. I bet they're making $6,000 or $7,000, and they're paying close to 50% of their income for that rent payment. And they can never buy a house because that's, like I said, 10 to 20 times their annual income, and it's just out of their reach. They don't have the big down payment needed either, and they can't save it because the rents are vacuuming up any of the extra money they might have to save for their future. So the government, if they wanted to make the standard of living higher, would be working to lower rents, to lower the cost of buying a house, the cost of houses. Are they doing that? No, they're doing exactly the opposite. The Federal Reserve is trying to raise the price of houses by its low interest programs and QE, quantitative easing programs. They're trying to raise the price of houses and assets. The exact opposite of what they would be doing if they wanted to improve people's standard of living. And I'm not going to get into everything the government could do to lower housing costs for people. I got into that in my podcasts number 2 and 3 called The Housing Super Ripoff. And Part 1 and Part 2 are in those podcasts. If you want to listen to those, they give you a better idea of what the government could do to lower housing prices if they wanted to. Today, I'm just going to say the government is doing everything it can to raise the price of housing and rents. And that is one of the main things, if not the main thing, that has lowered the American standard of living over the past 40 or 50 years from what it was in the 60s and 70s. And I'm just going to say a couple of things here about housing and building housing. If you try to build a house in any of these areas that are highly regulated, like along the coastlines in the United States, if you've ever done that, and I have done it, it is one of the most excruciating processes you ever want to go through. The bureaucrats in the building departments will be holding your hand all the way through the process and guiding you and telling you what you must do day after day after day, and how many fees and tens of thousands of dollars worth of fees that you're going to have to pay them to get your house built. This is one of the primary ways that they make housing expensive. They make it very, very difficult to build. If you ever do it, you'll know what I mean. It's a headache, it's a neck ache, it's a full body ache. You will not like the process. Building the house is nothing. Dealing with them is the problem. And all the money that you're going to have to give to them. And one of these days, I'm thinking about doing a podcast and just kind of outlining all the fees and all the regulations and everything it takes to build just even a small house and what you're going to have to go through. But it is just terrible. And that's one of the main reasons why housing is super expensive and rents are super expensive. Because anybody that goes through the process has got to get all that money back that they paid in fees, and they want to get paid for the trouble of going through all that crazy stuff. Other things government could do to lower the cost of living and raise the standard of living would be get the medical system under control. That is I think, one of the main ripoffs that everybody's dealing with, whether if you're just paying insurance, medical insurance, that's super expensive. You don't get much for your money there. Or if you have to go in for some kind of a procedure or operation, or even just some prescription drugs, out of this world. The prices are so high, only the very rich could afford to pay them without some kind of medical insurance. And that's super expensive too. So those are the things the government can do to try to lower the cost of living and raise the standard of living in people in the United States today. And that would be a lot better than raising minimum wage a couple of dollars an hour. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. I just don't think the minimum wage being raised, if they do get it raised up to $15 an hour, and I don't even believe they'll probably be able to get that through Congress anyway, but if they do, it's not the answer. The answer is higher productivity and lower prices and more business competition. Tougher competition between businesses is what lowers prices and raises our standard of living. Thank you for listening in today. And until next time, this is Lloyd Holiday signing off.